In 1977, Bowie was in Berlin. Why Berlin? I don't know. Perhaps the bleak anonymity of post-war Germany spoke to him. Or perhaps the reality of the divided Berlin spoke to the reality of the divided Bowie. During this time of sojourn and perambulation, during which he picked up the pieces of the life Los Angeles had nearly destroyed, Bowie made 3 albums, his so-called Berlin trilogy, Low, Heroes, and Lodger. In my increasingly not very humble opinion, Low is the best of these. It might in fact be the best thing he ever recorded. Well, top 4 for sure. Low is a strange album, and once again represents a radical transformation in Bowie's style. Station to Station was big, grand, harrowing, formal, and mannered. Low, on the other hand, is fragmentary, filled with bits and pieces that are not quite finished, experiments in sound that do not always go anywhere but are always fascinating to hear. The album's A-side is filled with short, energetic, avant-garde songs, 7 of them crammed into less than 20 minutes. No full, coherent vision emerges. Instead, the sense is that Bowie is playing around, messing about, perhaps even searching. It's like a musical anatomy, as if Bowie himself were pulling out and examining pieces of himself. Breaking Glass, for instance, seems to feature Bowie talking to himself. Such a wonderful person. But you've got problems. In Always Crashing in the Same Car, Bowie recounts one of his lowest, low, get it? Low? Lowest? LA moments. He apparently spotted a drug dealer he thought had ripped him off and repeatedly crashed his car into the drug dealer's car before driving back to his hotel, only to then drive around and around in circles in the parking garage, going faster and faster and just really tempting fate. But it's the album's B-side that fully demonstrates Bowie's new experimental attitude. It consists of 4 moody, synthesizer-heavy instrumental songs, the greatest of which, in that opinion again, is Warsaw. Worcestershire?
Warsaw.
A bleak soundscape inspired by Bowie's visit to the Polish capital. Warsaw, Bowie thought, was a haunted town, a just barely surviving town, a town still deeply marked by what it had suffered in World War II. No wonder it inspired the similarly haunted Bowie. The move towards instrumental songs represented a big departure for him, who for so long had been chasing marketable, chart-topping hits. But here he slowed down. It seemed less like he was playing to others, more like he was playing to himself. In fact, the album was so experimental that his label delayed its release several months, afraid it would be a commercial failure. It wasn't. But the thing I want to talk about is collaboration. No matter the album or the persona, Bowie was himself, whoever that might have been at the time. He was always the one in charge. Bowie was not a band. He was a singer-songwriter, his own man, and everything came down to his own artistic vision. But Bowie was always inspired and aided by the people he worked with. He absorbed their influence, their talent, their own unique visions. People like Mick Ronson, who was with Bowie throughout the Ziggy years, Carlos Alomar, who joined Bowie for Young Americans, providing the real soul and funk, and then stayed with Bowie for years, and, looking ahead a little bit, Nile Rodgers, who helped Bowie produce some of his biggest hits in the 80s, and Reeves Gabrels, who brought the heavier industrial sound that would define several of Bowie's 90s albums. On Low, Bowie collaborated with Brian Eno, who brought a synthesizer-heavy minimalist sensibility, and who brought out a new facet of Bowie's musical personality. Some collaborators stuck around for several albums. Some were only there for a short while. No one stuck around forever. Bowie wouldn't let them. All of a sudden, he would be done with them. In Eno's case, after Lodger, Eno was also done with Bowie. They had inspired and challenged each other, but both thought their collaboration had run its course and it was time to move on. Because of this, collaborating feverishly with someone and then suddenly not needing them anymore, some people have accused Bowie of being a sort of musical vampire, sucking the talent out of people, and sucking the talent out of people and then discarding them. Given the way Bowie was constantly changing who he himself was, and given how greatly influenced he was by those around him, it makes sense to me that he would routinely change who he worked with. It's a delicate business, finding that balance of yourself and others. Bowie needed to balance his own vision for himself with what others could contribute. I think we all do this, some way or another. We all absorb elements of the people around us. We are social sponges, soaking and slurping up different parts of different people. Ew. Sometimes others bring out the best in us, sometimes the worst. Some enable, some challenge. Side A of Low concludes with a new career in a new town, a sort of instrumental thesis statement about the need to move on, to change, to transform. It is also an admission that place, and I would argue people too, play a big role in this transformation. But another big change was looming on the horizon. So many changes. Lodger was released in 1979. The 70s were closing. Bowie had released 11 albums in 10 years. A monstrously productive and tumultuous decade. An art decade, to borrow one of the titles from Low. But the 80s were coming.